Last year, hare coursing was officially banned in Northern Ireland. Now, for those of you who don't know, coursing is a method apparently of training hounds by first blooding them and then having them chase live hares, often resulting in the death of the hare. Well, still, even with the practice banned, trainers have recently been seen blooding hounds in an East Belfast park by feeding them live rabbits. It all sounds pretty unpleasant, doesn't it? John Fitzgerald's founder of the campaign for the abolition of cruel sport. John, tell us about this incident.
Well, the incident in Belfast, well, of course, it's outside the jurisdiction. I'm based here in the Republic in County Kilkenny. But basically, trainers were seen in broad daylight, apparently, feeding live rabbits to greyhounds. It's a practice known as blooding, which I suppose the idea is to give the greyhound an edge, because if a greyhound is hyped up from blooding and all that, and from seeing the rabbit at close quarters and savagely tearing it apart and all that, the thinking is that when it's taken to the coursing field, or indeed the greyhound track, that it'll perform better. It's a bit like using illegal drugs to make a greyhound run faster, except it's a far more brutal, more cruel practice. But as far as hare coursing itself is concerned, there's a wider issue there, because here in the Republic we have over 70 coursing clubs, and between them they net between 7,000 and 8,000 hares per season. And these hares are, as you mentioned already, like they're basically set up as bait for pairs of greyhounds to chase. Now the idea is to test the skill and the stamina of each pair of greyhounds, but unfortunately the hare is a mere plaything in this. The purpose isn't to kill the hare, but many hares are injured. Many of them are, in spite of muzzling, many of them are pinned to the ground, tossed up into the air, battered and all that, and many others die from a condition known as stress myopathy, which affects a number of wildlife species. So in other words, a hare that is released after a coursing meeting may actually die a few hours, a few days afterwards as a result of that condition.
Now, you've been trying to get this addressed. I mean, as we said in the introduction, it's now illegal here in Northern Ireland, but you've been asking if Sinn Fein will address this issue at the Ardèche in the autumn, because they have a pro-coursing stance, haven't they?
Sinn Fein, now, I don't want to come across as being Sinn Fein or pro or anything. I don't have any particular, I'm not involved in any political party, but Sinn Fein, at the Sinn Fein Ardèche in, I think it was 2009, a motion was passed condemning hare coursing, but last year in 2010 the Ardèche passed an entirely different motion which more or less supported hare coursing on the basis that to ban it would drive it underground. Now we completely reject the notion, because on that logic, you could legalise cockfighting, bear bait, badger baiting or anything on the basis that it would be more difficult to regulate or whatever, but we say if something is cruel, it should be banned, and we compliment the Northern Ireland Assembly on banning it, because it's also been banned in Scotland, England, Wales, and before that in Australia and various other countries. So on animal welfare grounds, we believe it should be banned outright.
Right. I've got Sinn Féin MLA Francie Molloy on the line on this. Francie Molloy, you support your party's stance on this issue to keep coursing regulated and legal, is that right?
That's correct, and in fact I put forward an amendment to the legislation last year in the Assembly to ensure that we had regulation to manage the situation of large hare coursing other than ban it. But I think we're all realistic enough to know that just simply putting a ban on something doesn't mean to say it goes away or stops. And unfortunately what then happens is that it will continue, but unregulated and uncontrolled. At the present time, the proposals were to actually, and in the south of Ireland, where you actually have coursing, that the hare is actually protected, the hare has an outlet, and it actually means that the hare is protected in that way. It also is noticeable that in the areas where coursing takes place and where hares are collected, that the quality and the increase in the numbers of hares in that area has increased.
So you're saying that this is good for hares?
Well, I'm saying is that it is noticeable because of the treatment and the protection that those who are involved in the sport actually do engage in, that the hare is actually immunised, it actually is protected, and the hare is run through one course and is then released. So it's not a case of actually using the same hare several different times, and it is a matter of actually a means of actually managing and controlling the growth of the hares within the area. But it is noticeable on the record there from the Queen's University study last year, which indicates that the numbers of hares in areas where coursing takes place have increased over the years, not decreased.
John Fitzgerald, you've heard Francie Molloy says it's good for hares in the countryside.
No, not at all. Well, we would argue again, well, in relation to that study was conducted in cooperation with the coursing club, and the coursing club was told in advance that the people involved in the research would be coming along, so I don't think it has much credibility. But apart from that, it isn't really a conservation issue. Like, coursing clubs aren't necessary to regulate hares, and they don't keep the hare population down, because the coursing people themselves will tell you that they don't set out to actually kill them. That isn't the specific purpose. So it's not about population control. It's simply about a gamble and a laugh. That's what coursing is about. If you go to any coursing meeting, you'll see bookies and various other people, and really the hare is being set up as a pawn, as live bait for the two greyhounds. Now, the thing is, you see, Francie Molloy is talking about this from the point of view of sport, and that people enjoy the skill and the stamina of the greyhounds being tested. But there is an alternative. There's drag coursing, which replicates every single aspect of hare coursing, except the cruelty. You have a mechanical lure that dodges and twists and turns across the field, and the two hares chase this mechanical lure. And, you know, the better of the two greyhounds is declared the winner. And you have that in Australia and various other countries where live hare coursing has been banned.
Well, so let's ask him about that. I mean, Francie Molloy, would that not be, surely that would be much less cruel, would it not?
Well, that may be in relation to the hare and the dealing with that. But before long, we actually would probably find people like this actually saying, then it's cruel to the greyhound. And where do we actually stop? The people who are actually saying that coursing is cruel is the next stage then to ban the Grand National, to ban hunting, to ban the various different sports that the actually people are involved in.
Well, what about something like fox hunting on horses, which is banned, in most of the UK? Do you support that?
Well, I believe that it is important to protect the rural way of life, and all the various different sports that actually take place within the rural way of life should actually be looked at as regards to environmental issues and the activities that we actually have within the rural area. Because if we continue on the banning process, then we will finish up that there are no activities that will be allowed in the rural area by those sitting in an urban situation deciding in the future of how the rural sports and rural activity continue. So
and you don't take on board the fact that there is a fairly widely held view that this is old-fashioned blood sport. I mean, killing for the sake of it.
We're talking, Wendy, in relation to hare coursing.
Oh, yeah, but the hare is often killed, isn't it?
No, it's not often killed at all. It's very seldom that actually a hare is actually even injured, never mind killed, because, as I say, the hare has an outlet where the greyhounds can't follow it into and has an escape tunnel. So that it actually protects the hare in those coursing events. They're very short coursing events as well. So you have the hare used within it, and the hare is actually, as I say, a bait, but it's not a bait which actually is killed or even attacked or injured. And the dogs are muzzled. So you have all the protections built into it. And as I say, you then are dealing with healthy hares in the environment and actually dealing with the issues around the hare to protect it in the future.
Is it not the case that there are too many, perhaps, trendy urbanites who are trying to put their views forward in a way that's killing off the rural lifestyle, John? I mean, that is a view that a lot of people in the countryside would have.
Yeah, well, I see, I have nothing against, preserving rural culture. I've even written a few books down here in my part of the country promoting rural activities and rural traditions. Like, for example, you have Gaelic hurling and football and all. Those are rural traditions. But on the other hand, you can say dog fighting, badger baiting, cockfighting were once rural traditions that have since been banned. So we're not against an activity because it's either rural or urban. For example, dog fighting might be practiced in some urban areas, but just because I would condemn dog fighting doesn't mean that I'm condemning the urban culture. Basically, animal welfare groups are opposed to cruelty to animals, full stop, whether it's rural or urban or anything else. And again, coming back to what Francie says about hares not being injured, I mean, the wildlife rangers of the National Parks and Wildlife Service here in the Republic attend quite a number of hare coursing meetings throughout the season, and they draw up detailed reports. And under FOI, the animal welfare groups down here have got information. And, going through the reports, at virtually every coursing event that a wildlife ranger attends, you find horrendous abuses. Like, I have a few of them here in front of me here. Hare squealing in distress, cut by a muzzled dog, broken toe, knocks sustained during coursing, etc., etc. It goes on and on and on. And you see, it isn't a case of the hare being torn apart by the two greyhounds as in Britain before the ban. What's happening here, it's less visible. See, the hare is actually severely injured, and the hare is a brittle-boned creature. So when it sustains internal injuries or bone breakages, what happens is that the injuries don't heal, so the hares have to be killed anyway. So in some ways, muzzling has made coursing even more cruel, but it certainly hasn't improved the situation. And I would really, again, I would urge Francie and his colleagues within Sinn Fein who are pro-hare coursing to consider again the option of drag coursing, because in the countries where drag coursing has been introduced, nobody even talks about bringing back hare coursing again, because they can have all the fun and the excitement and the gambling, etc., without cruelty, you know.
Okay, John, I've got Liam. Liam has called in about this. Hello, Liam.
How you doing, Wendy? Wendy, I'm absolutely delighted that man you've just spoken to, John, has brought forward the issue to the point where I am now aware of what Sinn Féin's position is on it. And I'm absolutely disgusted that Francie Molloy and members of his party are standing by this disgusting act, and to try, as Francie Molloy is presenting it, as it's a way of life of country people. That's just not good enough. This is the 21st century. It used to be a way of life to endorse slavery. And until people wised up to that, and Wilberforce and all, people said, you know, this is barbaric, it was stopped. Is Francie Molloy proposing that because a barbaric act is commonplace in certain parts of the country, that it's therefore acceptable to the vast majority of us? It is not.
There you are, Francie Molloy. That's Liam's view.
I think, Wendy, it's very important to distinguish between... John gives some illustrations there of the brutality. He dismissed earlier on a very important survey that actually Queen's
University. I prefer you to address my point.
Well, what about Liam's point that he's called in about?
Let me take it in sequence here. Without actually any qualification of the reports that he's independent and who actually commissioned those reports or who commissioned those photographs that he's actually referring to, which we can't see, so we don't actually know. But it's not a barbaric sport. See, I actually do believe that the conditions have been put on the sport, and by regulating it, you then ensure that there is no brutality, that there is no injuries to the greyhounds or to the hares in this situation. But unfortunately, if you leave it uncontrolled, then what happens is what happens and what was described at the earlier stage.
Hang on a minute. We can't hear both of you, unfortunately. But Liam has rung in with a point, though. He says it's cruel, it's unnecessary, and he's disgusted and ashamed.
Well, I don't believe it is, and I think the point I'm actually making is that it's protection of the hare, and the hare has an outlet. There's no brutality on the hare in this type of situation. The dogs are muzzled, so the image that maybe people have in their mind of hares being attacked and hares being torn apart, that's not in reality.
Liam, could I just ask you, I mean, would you be a Sinn Féin voter?
Well, I'd be disposed that way, but never again. And let me just say this to Francie Molloy. It isn't about the hare being caught any more than a fox being caught. It's the chase and the trauma that's caused to that animal. And if Francie Molloy is trying to say the dogs are muzzled, if that's the best you can come up with, Francie, I'm sorry. Your party is absolutely discredited in this issue. I thought you were a party of the people. And here you are endorsing an act that is basically the preserve of a certain clique who don't give a damn about the feelings of the hare. It's about their animals, their dogs. The greyhounds aren't in any way suffering cruelty. Absolutely.
Well, Liam, have you ever actually witnessed this situation? Have you ever seen what actually happens in relation to a coursing event? That actually...
Sorry, Francis, you have to be present to see it happening, to know that it's happening. What a naive man you are, and to think that people like me would ever give you a vote again is just preposterous. I can't believe that a Sinn Féin man standing or sitting there given this position, and I'm sure there's other members of your party who are applauding what you're saying as well. It's not 100% blanket support for it. I know for a fact.
Francie Molloy, Liam's making his point. He clearly feels this very strongly. You know, you've lost his vote over this.
Well, I don't know where Liam's from or whether he ever voted.
I'm from Newry, Francie.
That's all. Newry, and yes, I think I recognise the accent as well. I'm not certain when we're talking to Liam or who we're talking to, but so I think there is a question mark over that. But the fact is, this has been debated in the Assembly. I put forward the proposal to amend and to ensure that we didn't get the situation where this particular activity would go underground, that it would go on protected and uncontrolled and unmanaged. because we do realise that it still will continue, despite what actually the legislation might actually say. And what we want to do...
Can I put one point to Francie in just a slightly different turn? Years ago, the British Army carried a yellow card, I think it was, basically that they could legitimise their actions whatever they were. And everybody knew that that was just a bit of a cod. Okay? And Francie would be the first man to say, okay, they have a legitimate path to follow, but we all know that it's unlikely to be adhered to. And here he is now saying that because it's legal and managed, it's much better than driving it underground. Again, the naivety of you, Francie, is just... I'm absolutely appalled at you.
Well, it's clearly some...
I think we're talking about two entirely different situations there.
You get my point, and I know you...
reputation in relation to that, you know.
I think we're not likely to get agreement on this, folks, but by the sound of things, it's something that's not going to go away. John Fitzgerald, thanks for bringing your point of view to that. Thanks to Francie and Molloy as well. Thanks very much for the call, Liam. And we'll look forward and look ahead to see if perhaps this raises its head in the Assembly again in the next session in the coming year. It's 1 o'clock. You're listening to Talkback with Wendy Austin.